My name is Maria Alvarez, and at 59 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of pain a mother could possibly endure. I survived the death of my husband, 2 hurricanes, 3 layoffs, and a lifetime of loneliness. But nothing, absolutely nothing, cut as deeply as the moment my only son raised his hand against me. People always say, you raise your children so they never forget who stood beside them when the world turned cruel. But what they never tell you is that sometimes, the children you pour your soul into end up becoming the very storm you need protection from. It didn't happen suddenly. No, these things never do. Disrespect is a slow erosion like water eating at stone. First comes the tone, then the slammed doors, then the threats, then, if you're unlucky enough, one day the hands follow. But I stayed because I am a mother. And mothers, especially single ones, don't get the luxury of walking away. We endure, we sacrifice. We forgive beyond reason. That day, however, the day my son hit me in front of his wife, something in me died, not the soft mother's heart, no. That heart kept beating, still loving him despite the bruise blooming on my cheek. What died was my silence. 3 days later, I took revenge, not revenge out of anger. No, revenge out of justice. Revenge out of the simple belief that a child should never, ever forget who brought them into this world, and that you do not raise your hand at the hands that once fed you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My son, Daniel, is 33. He has a wife named Alicia, a beautiful girl with long black hair and an uncomfortable smile that disappears whenever Daniel raises his voice. The kind of woman who flinches before a hand even lifts. I recognized that fear. I lived that fear once, decades ago, with his father. And that was the problem, wasn't it? Children inherit more than just your eyes or your smile. They inherit your patterns. Daniel inherited his father's anger. Except where my husband had fists, Daniel had arrogance. Where my late husband used silence as his weapon, Daniel used shame. His favorite sentence: Mom, you live in the past. This is MY house. He never, and I mean never, acknowledged that it was my savings, my late night shifts, my extra cleaning jobs that helped him buy that house in the first place. But that is the curse of motherhood. Everything you give becomes invisible. It happened on a Sunday evening. The kind of quiet, uneventful evening you never expect to turn into a nightmare. I had gone to Daniel's house because he asked me to help clean before Alicia's family came to visit. I arrived early, carrying a casserole like always. I'm old-fashioned that way. You don't enter someone's house empty-handed, especially not your child S. Alicia greeted me at the door, smiling politely but nervously. Hi, Mama Maria, Daniel S. in the living room. I noticed her eyes shift toward the hallway as if checking that he wasn't watching. That was the first red flag of the night. I stepped inside. Daniel didn't look up from his phone. Mom, he muttered, no kiss, no hug, nothing. I went straight to the kitchen. I started cleaning, wiping counters, sweeping, organizing. I didn't complain. I never complained. Mothers don't. But then I opened the trash bin and saw something that made my blood run cold. A crumpled envelope. My handwriting. The envelope I had given Daniel 2 weeks before. The envelope containing the exact money he needed for his mortgage payment. Thrown away, untouched. I pulled it out, smoothing the paper with my hand like I was smoothing my own heart. Daniel, I said softly, why didn't you deposit the money I gave you? The due date was last. He cut me off with a laugh, a mocking, cruel laugh. Oh, that. Alicia and I didn't need it. Alicia's eyes widened. She looked shocked, almost scared, as if she didn't agree with a single word Daniel was saying. Daniel continued, seriously, Mom, stop acting like you're still responsible for me. You can't just hand me cash like I'm some child. My face warmed. I'm not treating you like a child, I just wanted to help. Yeah, well, stop. He leaned back on the couch, spreading his arms like he owned the world. I'm a grown man now. You showing up with money, food, advice, it just makes you look desperate. Alicia inhaled sharply. I saw her flinch. She had heard this tone before. My heart dropped. Desperate? I whispered. Daniel, I only wanted. Wanted what? He snapped. Control? Power? This is MY house. Stop acting like you own it just because you contributed a little. A little? I whispered. That mortgage help was half my savings, but Daniel wasn't done humiliating me. He stood up, walked toward me, and smacked the envelope out of my hand. The paper fluttered to the floor like a wounded bird. Alicia gasped, covering her mouth. Daniel. She cried. I bent down to pick it up, my knees shaking. And then it happened. The moment that turned my world black. He grabbed my wrist, hard, too hard, and he shoved me so forcefully I stumbled back and hit the edge of the counter. Pain shot through my hip. Alicia screamed. Daniel, stop! But he didn't stop. He stepped closer, towering over me like a stranger. For the last time, he hissed, stop interfering in my life, get out of my house. I stared at him, tears filling my eyes. My house, I whispered, because that was the irony. The foundation under his feet was built on my sacrifices. He pointed at the door like I was trash. Out! He hit my arm again, not hard enough to leave a fracture, but hard enough to send a message. And that was the moment Alicia saw it. The truth, the monster she married. She started crying silently, frozen between us. I didn't blame her. She had no power in that house either. I picked up my purse. I walked toward the door. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I left quietly, because sometimes silence is more terrifying than rage. And as I stepped off his porch, something in me shifted. A mother forgives thousands of things, but not this. I whispered into the night, one day, Daniel, you will learn. What I didn't know then was that one day would come 3 days later. And when it came, the lesson wouldn't just break him. It would break the very foundation he stood on. When I reached home that night, if you could call the small, quiet apartment a home anymore, I closed the door gently behind me. My palms were still trembling, my wrist already swelling, my heart cracked somewhere deep inside my ribcage. I didn't cry, not yet. Crying would have meant accepting that what happened truly happened, and my mind wasn't ready to face that. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, turned on the stove, and made tea with hands that shook like old branches in the wind. The apartment felt unusually cold, even though the air was still and warm. Grief creates its own weather. I sat at the table and wrapped my hands around the cup for warmth, but nothing warmed the place Daniel had bruised inside me. It wasn't the pain in my wrist. It wasn't even the push, it was the truth. My son, the child I raised alone, the child I worked 3 jobs for, the child I starved for so he could eat, shoved me like I was nothing, like I was an inconvenience. Like I was a ghost haunting his perfect life. And worst of all, he did it in front of his wife. He chose humiliation over respect, cruelty over love, violence over gratitude. I closed my eyes and finally let the tears fall. Silent tears, heavy tears, the kind of tears that carry years of exhaustion. There is a kind of heartbreak only a mother knows, when your child becomes the person you once protected them from. And that night, I knew. I had protected Daniel from the world all his life. Now I had to protect the world from him. The next morning, I woke with a bruised arm and a resolve I didn't fully understand yet. I cleaned the house, washed dishes, watered the plants, anything to keep my mind busy. But every quiet moment was filled with echoes of Daniel's voice. Get out of my house. Stop interfering. You're desperate. He didn't call the next day or the day after that. Not even a message. Not even Alicia reached out. That silence told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't ashamed. He probably justified it in his head 1,000 different ways. Abusers always do. I sat at my kitchen table on the third morning, staring at the bruise on my wrist. It had turned a deep purple surrounded by a sickly yellow halo. A reminder. A bruise is a mother's secret, something she covers because the truth hurts too deeply to show. But this bruise wasn't going to be a secret. Not anymore. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small card. A card most people hope they'll never have to use. Detective Ramirez, Family Violence Unit, he had given it to me 2 years ago after he spoke at the community center where I volunteered. He talked about warning signs, about cycles repeating across generations, about how silence was the abuser's greatest ally. At the time, I kept the card just in case. I never expected the case would be my own son, but life doesn't warn you before it breaks your heart. I placed the card on the table, took a deep breath, and dialed the number. Family Violence Unit, this is Ramirez. His voice was calm, professional, steady. Detective, I said, voice trembling. It's Maria from the community center. There was a brief pause. Maria, he said gently, already sensing what lay behind my silence. Talk to me. The words poured out of me, halting, shaking, stumbling between breaths, but I told him everything. Not just about the shove, not just about the bruise. I told him about Daniel's escalating temper over the years, the verbal abuse, the threats, the financial manipulation, the guilt, the control, and the worst part, that I let it slide every time because he's my son. By the time I finished, my voice was gone. Detective Ramirez exhaled slowly through the line. Maria, he said quietly, you did the right thing by calling. I don't want him to be arrested, I whispered. He's still my son. I need this to stop. I need him to understand. There are ways we can handle this, he replied. But I need to ask you something important and answer honestly. I swallowed. Do you believe his wife is safe in that house? The question hit me like a brick. Alicia's face flashed in my mind, the fear in her eyes, the way she shrank when Daniel spoke. Her lips pressed together like she was swallowing words she was too scared to speak. I closed my eyes. No, I whispered. She isn't safe. That was the moment everything changed, because reporting my own son wasn't the only step I took. It was the first step. Before Ramirez could speak again, I said something that stunned even me. Detective, I have proof. Proof of what? I stood, walked to my bedroom, reached underneath my bed, and pulled out a small metal box. I placed it on the bed and opened it, the old hinges squeaking softly. Inside were documents, years' worth, bank transfers I had made to Daniel. Copies of loans I paid off for him. Screenshots of messages where he threatened to cut me off if I didn't help him. Audio clips, recordings I made months ago, not because I wanted to expose him, but because I wanted to understand him. Proof that Daniel had been emotionally abusing me for years. But there was more. Proof that he had done the same to Alicia. Secret recordings she had sent me once, crying, whispering, begging me not to tell him she reached out. I never showed them to anyone. I told her I'd help her leave if she ever wanted to. She never did, because fear cages even the strongest birds. But now those recordings would save her life. Maria, Ramirez said slowly, what you have is more than evidence. It's a case file, a substantial one. I didn't collect it to destroy him, I whispered. I collected it to protect him, but he crossed a line. What do you want to happen? I sat on the bed, clutching the metal box. I want him to learn respect, not through handcuffs, not through jail, but through consequences. Ramirez understood instantly. You want leverage, he said. Yes, I breathed. Leverage and help. Then let's proceed carefully, he replied. I'll need copies of everything. Once we review it, we'll determine the safest course for you, for his wife, and yes, even for him. My chest tightened. Thank you. He paused before hanging up. Maria, whatever comes next, you're not alone. By the third day, things had moved faster than I expected. Ramirez visited my apartment. He reviewed every document, every recording, every message. His expression darkened with every page he turned. Maria, he said at one point, rubbing his forehead, this is much worse than you described. I knew. Mothers always downplay their suffering. We think if we soften the story, the pain softens too. It doesn't. By the time he stood to leave, he had everything he needed to intervene without making this a criminal arrest, yet. Now, he said, placing the box gently back on my bed, one last question. What is it? Are you ready? Ready. The word hung in the air like a prophecy. I wasn't ready to destroy my son. I wasn't ready to see the look on his face when he realized what I'd done. I wasn't ready to confront decades of silence. But I was ready for one thing. I was ready for him to never raise his hand at anyone again. Yes, I whispered. I'm ready. Ramirez nodded, stepped out, and made a call that would bring everything to Daniel's doorstep, a call that would change the course of his life, a call that would make him fall to his knees. That evening, I sat by my window watching the sky turn orange, then pink, then black. My heart pounded, not out of fear, but out of the strange calm that comes right before justice arrives. At 8:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. A single message from Ramirez. They're on their way. They did not mean police in handcuffs. They meant a domestic intervention team, a crisis unit designed for situations exactly like this. Situations where violence hasn't escalated to murder yet, but will if something doesn't change. I stood, smoothed my hair, and exhaled. And then I whispered, God, guide my child tonight. Not to protect him from consequences, but to protect him from himself. Across the city, while I stood by my window gathering my courage, Daniel and Alicia were sitting at their dining table. I didn't know this at the time, not until later, but Alicia had barely spoken all day. She moved around the house quietly, like a ghost, flinching every time Daniel raised his voice or slammed a drawer. Guilt is a heavy thing, and Daniel, though he would never admit it aloud, had just begun to feel its weight. Not enough to apologize, not enough to change. Just enough to make him short-tempered, restless, irritated by the smallest sound. Alicia's silence bothered him. My silence bothered him more. Abusers hate silence. Silence means they no longer control the narrative. Silence is unpredictable. Silence is unsettling. And I had been silent for 3 whole days. At 9:16 p.m., exactly 34 minutes after Ramirez's message, a firm knock echoed through Daniel's hallway. 3 knocks, not aggressive, not urgent, but authoritative. Daniel looked up from his phone, eyebrows tightening. Who the hell? Alicia froze. She knew that kind of knock. She had heard it before, once when she was 19 and living with parents who fought like wolves. She recognized the tone of a knock meant for confrontation, for truth, for breaking the silence of a home filled with secrets. Daniel stood, muttering under his breath, irritation dripping from every step. But the moment he opened the door, the moment he saw the uniforms, everything inside him shifted. 2 officers stood there, calm but firm. Behind them stood a woman in plain clothes wearing a domestic intervention badge on a lanyard. Mr. Daniel Alvarez? The officer asked, Daniel's face drained of color. Why? He snapped. What do you want? This is a welfare and domestic well-being intervention. We've received reports indicating possible emotional and physical safety concerns inside this home. Alicia's breath caught in her throat. Daniel's jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. Who reported? The second officer lifted a device. We'll explain everything inside, sir. He stepped forward, not forcing entry, but making it clear refusing wasn't an option. Alicia backed away instinctively, her eyes darting between Daniel and the officers like a trapped bird, unsure of which direction held danger. Is your wife home? The female intervention specialist asked. I'm right here, Alicia whispered. Her voice cracked on the second word. The woman nodded gently. We need to speak with each of you separately. No, Daniel snapped, stepping between them. You're not separating us. This is my house. Sir, the officer said, voice calm but stern, your cooperation is mandatory. And if I don't cooperate, the officer held his gaze. Then we proceed differently. Those words hung in the air like a final warning. Daniel, realizing he wasn't in control of the situation, stepped back with clenched fists. Fine, talk, do whatever, this is stupid. The specialist turned to Alicia first. Ma'am, could we speak privately? Alicia's eyes flickered nervously toward Daniel, then back to the woman. Yes, she whispered. They stepped into the kitchen, closing the door softly behind them. Daniel paced like a caged animal. What is this? What is this? He muttered. His breathing quickened, the panic he tried to hide starting to claw through his composure. That's when the officer spoke again. Sir, someone filed a comprehensive safety report with documented evidence. Significant evidence. Daniel froze mid-stride. His eyes snapped up. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl. Who? The officer didn't answer. He didn't need to. In that heavy silence, Daniel realized the truth. It was me. Meanwhile, ATMY apartment, I sat at my kitchen table, hands folded, staring at the soft glow of a single lamp. I wasn't trembling anymore. I wasn't crying anymore. There comes a moment when a mother's heart burns with such clarity that fear has no oxygen left to exist. That was me. My phone lay on the table, screen dark, waiting. Every part of me imagined Daniel's face as the truth unfolded. The shock, the panic. The disbelief that his mother, the woman who forgave everything, had finally acted. But this wasn't vengeance out of spite. This was the kind of justice that arrives when love has been abused too deeply to stay silent. I whispered to myself, let him learn, let him understand. The clock ticked softly. Back at Daniel's house, ALICIA speaks inside the kitchen. Alicia broke down within seconds. The specialist gently placed a glass of water in front of her. Alicia, you're safe, you can speak freely. Alicia's shoulders shook. Tears fell silently onto the table. I didn't want this, she whispered. I didn't call anyone, I did? I know, the woman said gently, but someone who cares about you did. Alicia closed her eyes. She knew instantly who it was. Not Daniel, never Daniel. Has Daniel ever physically hurt you? The specialist asked. Alicia hesitated because victims never want to say yes. Saying yes makes it real. Saying yes makes the fear something with teeth. Finally, in a trembling whisper, yes, her voice broke. Has he hurt his mother? Alicia covered her face. Yes. Do you feel safe in this home? Long silence. Then, no. Those 3 answers, simple, fragile, honest, were enough to shift everything. The specialist nodded, stood, and gently touched Alicia's shoulder. You just helped us protect you. Outside the kitchen, the officer's radio crackled softly. The kitchen door opened. The specialist stepped out. Daniel immediately lunged forward. What did she say? What lies did she tell you? Sir, the officer said firmly, step back. Daniel glared at all of them. She said something, didn't she? My wife is emotional. She exaggerates. You can't take. She confirmed physical and emotional harm, the specialist said calmly. Daniel's face twisted. She's lying. And your mother? The officer asked. Silence. A dead, frozen silence. Daniel blinked. What about her? The officer watched him closely. Did you put your hands on her? No, Daniel snapped. The officer raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Daniel's eyes widened for a split second, panic rushes into the smallest cracks. She tripped. I didn't. Your mother has documented bruising, the officer replied. She has messages, recordings, financial records, and third-party confirmations. Daniel's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He sank onto a chair, suddenly feeling very small. The female specialist opened a folder. Inside were printed photos. Daniel recognized them instantly. Photos only one person had access to, me. Pictures of bruises, screenshots of messages, financial statements, recordings transcribed into text. Everything he had dismissed. Everything he had minimized. Everything he had told himself wasn't that bad, laid out in front of him like a mirror he could no longer turn away from. No, he whispered, voice cracking. She wouldn't do this. She's my mother. The officer spoke softly. Your mother did not press charges. She did not request your arrest. She requested intervention before this escalates into something irreversible. Daniel swallowed hard. His bravado crumbled. His anger dissolved into fear. His ego shattered, because now the truth stood before him. His own mother had reached her limit. The officer continued. Mr. Alvarez, based on the evidence, the risk assessment of your behavior is categorized as high. A protective safety plan will be implemented effective immediately. What does that mean? Daniel whispered. It means, the specialist said, that you are legally prohibited from contacting, threatening, or approaching your mother for a minimum of 90 days. Violating that order results in immediate arrest. Daniel's mouth fell open. And regarding your wife, she continued, she will be given temporary relocation options until further evaluation. Alicia's breath caught. Daniel shook his head violently. No, you can't take her from me. Your behavior took her from you, the specialist replied gently. Those words landed like a hammer on stone. Daniel's voice broke. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Things get stressful, and that's why intervention exists, the officer said. To stop this cycle before someone ends up seriously hurt or worse. Daniel lowered his head into his hands. For the first time in years, he looked less like a grown man and more like a scared child who finally realized his actions had consequences. The moment he fell to his knees, do you want to know the hardest part? The specialist asked softly. Daniel didn't look up. She didn't want us to punish you. She wanted us to help you. His shoulders shook. She loves you, Daniel, but love is not immunity. When he finally lifted his head, tears spilled down his face. The officer's next words finished breaking him. Your mother requested one thing before she stepped away. Daniel's voice cracked. What? That you receive mandatory counseling, anger management, trauma therapy. Daniel stared at the officers, stunned. She thinks I need help? No, the specialist corrected softly. She knows you need help. Daniel's knees hit the floor. Not dramatically, not theatrically, just surrendered, broken by his own reflection, broken by the consequences he never expected, broken by the realization that the one person he thought would always stay silent finally spoke. Before leaving, the officer placed a small sealed envelope on the table. Your mother asked us to give you this after our discussion. Daniel reached for it with trembling hands, but he didn't open it yet. He just held it, staring at it, like it was the last piece of a life he had destroyed with his own hands. Inside was a message I had written hours earlier, a message that would echo through him long after the police left. But that message belongs in part 2, because part 1 ends here. With Daniel on his knees in his living room, surrounded by evidence of his cruelty, facing consequences he never imagined, realizing the woman he pushed out of his home was the only person who ever truly cared. And now, the lesson was just beginning. Daniel didn't sleep that night. His house, once the symbol of his pride, his dominance, his control, felt suddenly hollow, stripped of its authority. The kitchen light buzzed faintly, the refrigerator hummed, the night wind pressed against the windows, but everything else was silent, too silent, the kind of silence that chokes you. The officers were gone. The intervention specialist was gone. Alicia had been escorted to a safe location, an apartment arranged by the crisis team, leaving Daniel alone for the first time in years. And he hated it. He sat on the living room floor, the envelope I sent him clutched in his trembling hands. His wrists still bore faint marks from where he had clenched them too tightly. His shirt was wrinkled. His face was streaked with tears he didn't even remember shedding. He looked like a man whose world had finally collapsed, but not in the way movies portray collapse. There was no dramatic screaming, no broken furniture, no smashed glass, just a dawning awareness. A slow, creeping realization he had lost control, because he had first lost compassion, then respect, then himself, and for the first time he had to face a truth he had spent years running from. Mom didn't deserve any of this. But guilt can't heal wounds, realization can't undo bruises, and silence, after years of verbal violence, can't act as an apology. Still, Daniel clung onto the envelope. He didn't open it, not yet. He was too afraid of what was inside. Words can wound deeper than fists, but they can also save. And Daniel wasn't sure which kind my message contained. I sat curled on my old sofa, feet tucked under me, wrapped in a thin blanket. The night air seeped in from the slightly open window, filling the room with a soft, cool breeze. My tea sat untouched on the table. I didn't need warmth, I needed clarity. 3 days ago, I walked out of Daniel's house bruised. Tonight, he sat in his own house, emotionally bruised. That wasn't revenge, that was justice. That was the universe rearranging the balance. But justice is not the end of a story, it's the turning point. Because I didn't want my son destroyed, I wanted him transformed. I wanted him to understand the cost of the choices he made. I wanted him to see that respect isn't inherited, it's earned. I tightened the blanket around me. I missed him, not the man he had become, but the boy he once was. The boy who used to run into my arms after school. The boy who cried when he scraped his knee. The boy who whispered, "Mom, I'll take care of you when I'm older." I closed my eyes, letting the memory wash over me, letting it hurt, letting it soften, letting it remind me why I did all of this. People think a mother's revenge comes from hatred. No, a mother's revenge comes from love that has been worn down to bone, and I had reached bone. Inside the envelope, Daniel finally opened it, slowly, as if the paper could explode. Inside was a single page, handwritten in careful cursive, my handwriting, the same handwriting that had once written notes for his lunchbox and birthday cards and messages slipped into his pockets during exams. He unfolded it, breath hitching. The letter read, "Daniel, I am not punishing you, I am protecting you. From the man you are becoming, from the anger you inherited, from the path your father walked that led to his grave. You think strength is raising your voice, you think power is control, you think respect is demanded. You are wrong. Strength is restraint, power is responsibility. Respect is earned. You hurt me, Daniel, you hurt your wife, and I stayed silent for too long. But silence is how monsters grow. My silence helped create yours. That is my failure. This intervention is my correction. I want you to heal, not for me, not for Alicia, but for the man you still can become. The man I know is buried inside the anger. You are not lost, but you are breaking. And broken men destroy everything they touch. Get help. Do the work. Become someone your future children would be safe with. I am stepping back now, not out of abandonment, but out of love. You cannot learn respect while standing under the shelter of the woman you disrespect. When you are ready to talk to me with honesty and accountability, you will know where to find me. Mom Daniel read it once. Then again, slower, hands trembling. He pressed the letter to his forehead and sobbed, loud, shaking sobs that he had held back for decades. The kind of sobs a child cries when he realizes he has broken the only thing that ever held him together. He cried for the boy he used to be. He cried for the man he became. He cried for the mother he pushed away. He cried for the wife he scared into silence. He cried because the truth had finally caught him. At 11:04 p.m., Daniel's phone vibrated. He wiped his face and answered without checking the screen. "Hello?" His voice was cracked, raw. A gentle voice responded. "Daniel, this is Dr. Lawson. I'm the trauma and behavioral therapist the intervention team assigned to you." Daniel stiffened. "I wanted to let you know, doctor." Lawson continued softly, "that your mother requested I contact you tonight instead of waiting until morning." Daniel swallowed hard. "She asked me to remind you of one thing." He clutched the phone tighter. "Your healing doesn't start when you feel ready," the therapist said. "It starts when your excuses run out." Daniel broke again, because for the first time in his life, his excuses had truly run out. Meanwhile, Alicia sat in a small, quiet apartment provided by the crisis team. 2 officers escorted her there. The lights were warm, the bed neatly made, the air calm, but she couldn't stop shaking. Her whole life, she had walked on eggshells. Her whole life, she had learned to shrink, to apologize, to stay quiet, to avoid triggering tempers she didn't cause. But tonight, someone had finally said, "You deserve safety." She curled up under the blanket and cried, not because she wanted her old life back, but because she finally realized she had lost herself somewhere along the way. She whispered into the dark, "Thank you, Mama Maria," and she meant it. Because I had saved her without even realizing how badly she needed saving. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Daniel's window like a spotlight exposing a crime scene. He looked around the room with new eyes. The couch where he once shouted. The table where he once slammed his fist. The hallway where Alicia used to flinch. The door he forced me out of, he stood up slowly. His knees hurt, his chest felt heavy, his heart felt bruised. He wasn't healed, but for the first time, he wanted to be. He walked to his bathroom, splashed water on his face, and stared into the mirror. Dark circles under his eyes, jaw clenched, tension etched into every line of his expression. He didn't recognize the man in the reflection, so he whispered, "I don't want to be you anymore." And with that, he picked up his phone. Who did he call? Not me, not Alicia, not a friend. He called the therapist. "Dr. Lawson, this is Daniel. I want to schedule an appointment today, as soon as you can." The therapist's warm voice responded. "That is the first step. I'll see you in 2 hours." And for the first time in years, Daniel felt something unfamiliar, hope. Faint, fragile, but real. Daniel arrived at the therapist's office 10 minutes early. He sat in the small waiting room, hands clasped together, foot tapping uncontrollably. A young receptionist smiled politely at him, but Daniel couldn't look her in the eyes. He wasn't used to feeling small, insignificant, stripped of the authority he once clung to. But today, he felt exactly that. The office was warm and calm, decorated with soft beige walls, plants that seemed too alive for such a quiet place, and a bookshelf filled with titles he had never read. Books about trauma, emotional cycles, generational patterns, boundaries, inner child healing. The presence of those books alone made something inside him twist. For years, he told himself he didn't need help. For years, he believed emotions were weaknesses. For years, he saw therapy as something broken people did. But now, he couldn't shake the truth. He was the broken one. And he had broken others. The door opened. A gentle-looking man in his early 50s stepped out, holding a clipboard. His voice was soft, grounding. "Daniel, I'm Dr. Lawson. Come on in." Daniel stood, his throat tight, and followed him into the office. The office felt too quiet, too exposed. Daniel sat on the couch, stiff as a statue. Dr. Lawson sat across from him with a relaxed posture, legs crossed, hands resting on a notebook he didn't open yet. He waited. Silence has a way of forcing truth to the surface. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. "I'm not sure what to do." "That's a very good way to start," Dr. Lawson replied gently. "Therapy isn't about knowing what to do, it's about discovering what you've been avoiding." Daniel shifted, uncomfortable. "I know I messed up with my mom. With my wife, mistakes can be corrected," the therapist said. "Patterns need to be understood." Daniel looked down. "So," Dr. Lawson continued, "tell me what happened." Daniel inhaled sharply. His voice cracked on the first sentence. "I hit my mother." The words tasted like rust, bitter, metallic, shameful, and I scared my wife. I hurt them both. I didn't mean to, I just something snapped. "What snapped?" the therapist asked. Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't know." Dr. Lawson studied him carefully. "What were you feeling in that moment?" Anger, shame, embarrassment, fear. But those weren't the real answers, not deep enough. After a long pause, Daniel whispered, "Powerless." That word hung in the room. Dr. Lawson nodded slowly, as if Daniel had just uncovered the first stone of a buried truth. "Daniel," he said softly, "powerlessness often comes from something deeper, something older, something unprocessed." Daniel frowned. "Like what?" "Like childhood." The word made Daniel's jaw tight. Childhood, a place he never visited in his mind. A place filled with memories he refused to acknowledge. Doctor. Lawson watched him carefully. "Tell me about your father." Daniel looked away. "He died when I was 13. "I didn't ask when he died," Dr. Lawson said gently. "I asked what he was like." Daniel's stomach twisted. He hadn't spoken about his father in years. Not with friends, not with Alicia, not even with himself. He didn't remember the man often, but when he did, the memories were sharp, uncomfortable, heavy. He was, Daniel hesitated, strict. "What does strict mean in your home?" Silence. Then, after several breaths, he yelled a lot. "What else?" Daniel rubbed his jaw, avoiding the therapist's eyes. "He hit me sometimes, when I made mistakes, when he was angry, when he felt like it." Dr. Lawson nodded slowly. "Daniel, that isn't strict, that's violence." Daniel flinched. "And how did your mother react when he hurt you?" the therapist asked. Daniel closed his eyes. Flashes, broken memories. A woman crying silently in the hallway. A woman putting ice on his arm. A woman begging his father to stop. A woman apologizing over and over even though she wasn't the one who did anything wrong. She tried, Daniel said in a broken whisper. She tried to protect me. The therapist leaned forward slightly. And how did you feel when she could? Daniel's voice cracked, angry. There it was, the truth, the first ugly truth inside him. Daniel, Dr. Lawson said, children don't process trauma as trauma, they interpret it emotionally. Many grow up believing, if my mother can't protect me, then I must take control. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. What you did to your mother wasn't about power over her, the therapist continued softly. It was the echo of a child who once felt powerless and helpless, a child who never healed, a child who learned to shout before being shouted at. Daniel stared at him, stunned. You're saying I'm acting like my father? The therapist didn't flinch. No, I'm saying you are acting like the boy your father hurt, trying to regain the power he felt. And that boy grew up without learning healthier ways to cope. Daniel covered his face with his hands. A low sob shook his body. He wasn't crying for what he did. He was crying because, for the first time, he could finally see the chain. His father hurt him. He suppressed it. He tried to become the opposite. Instead, the wound inside him became the weapon he used on others. Generational pain is a tide, it sweeps forward unless someone decides to stop it. Daniel realized with crushing clarity he had never stopped it. He had continued it, he had become it. Daniel, doctor. Lawson said gently, you need to understand something crucial. Hurt people don't always hurt people, but unhealed people do. Daniel sniffed, wiping his eyes. And am I unhealed? Horribly, the therapist said without cruelty, but not hopelessly. Daniel looked up, eyes shaking. Can I fix this? You cannot fix the past, the therapist replied, but you can break the cycle. Daniel swallowed. And my mother, my wife, what about them? Dr. Lawson folded his hands. That depends on your next choices, not your guilt, not your tears, your actions. Daniel nodded slowly. And the first action, the therapist added, is learning to apologize with accountability, not excuses. Daniel's lip trembled. I want to fix everything I destroyed. You can't fix everything, Dr. Lawson said, but you can rebuild something new. Daniel sat in silence, absorbing every word. Toward the end of the session, Dr. Lawson asked, Daniel, do you know why your mother stayed silent all these years? Why she endured, why she didn't fight back? Daniel frowned. Because she's kind, soft, forgiving. No, the therapist said gently. She stayed silent to protect you. Daniel looked confused. Protect me from what? The therapist turned a page in his notes. Your father didn't just hurt you, Daniel. He hurt her. A lot more than you know. Daniel's breath caught. What? No, she never told me. Because she didn't want you to see him as a monster, Dr. Lawson said softly. She wanted you to have at least one good memory of him. Daniel's chest tightened. What are you saying? Dr. Lawson exhaled. I'm saying your mother stepped in front of his fists more times than any child should ever know. She absorbed the violence so you didn't have to. She sacrificed pieces of herself so you could survive your childhood intact. Daniel felt like his world tilted. His lungs struggled to pull in air. She protected you, Dr. Lawson said, from the very man she eventually lost to his own rage. Daniel's entire face crumpled. He whispered, broken, God, what have I done to her? Daniel left the therapist's office feeling like someone had scooped out everything inside him and left only raw, exposed nerves behind. The sun was bright, too bright for the heaviness in his chest. Cars passed, people walked. Life continued, oblivious to the storm unraveling inside him. He sat in his car, resting his forehead against the steering wheel. For years, he believed he was the strong one. For years, he believed raising his voice meant authority. For years, he believed control made him powerful. Now he understood that everything, had been a lie he told himself so he wouldn't have to face the truth. He was terrified. He was unhealed. He was repeating the very pain he once swore to escape. He sobbed into his hands, body shaking, until he couldn't cry anymore. I watered my plants that morning. I swept the kitchen floor. I made rice soup and left it simmering on the stove. Life had a strange way of continuing softly, even after earthquakes shake your world. I didn't hate Daniel. I didn't even resent him. But there was a difference between love and access, between forgiveness and tolerance, between caring for someone and enabling them, and for the first time in my life, I dared to choose myself. I rubbed the bruise on my wrist gently. It didn't hurt as much anymore. The purpling had begun to fade into yellow, a sign that healing, slow, quiet healing was underway. A small knock startled me. No fear, just surprise. When I opened the door, Alicia stood there. Her hair was tied back, her eyes still swollen from crying, but she looked lighter. Like someone who had finally taken her first breath after years of suffocating, I pulled her into my arms without a word. She hugged me tightly, like a child seeking warmth. "Thank you," she whispered into my shoulder. "You saved me." I stroked her hair. "No, my dear. You saved yourself, I only opened the door." She pulled away, tears shining. "I didn't know how to leave, I didn't know I even could. He always apologized after hurting me, and I believed him every time." "That's not your fault," I whispered. She shook her head. "But you didn't deserve any of it, you're his mother." I closed my eyes. "Yes, and that's exactly why I had to stop him." Alicia wiped her tears. "Do you think he'll change?" I sighed softly. "Change is possible, but only if he chooses it. Not for us, for himself." She nodded slowly. She understood. Then she handed me something, a small white card. "I found this in Daniel's drawer," she said quietly. "I don't think he ever planned to give it to you, but you should see it." I took the card. My breath stopped. It was a Mother's Day card. Unopened, unwritten inside, but at the bottom, in Daniel's handwriting, just one line: "I don't know how to say sorry, Mom." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Alicia touched my arm gently. "There's hope in him." I think you reaching out for help, it woke something inside him. Hope, fragile, flickering, but real. Daniel's house felt different when he walked back in. He noticed things he had never noticed before: the dent in the wall from when he slammed a door, the chipped mug Alicia dropped during one of his outbursts, the faint scratch on the floor from the night he threw his keys in anger, the discolored spot on the carpet where I once spilled tea and he yelled at me for making a mess. Everything was a reminder. A map of pain he had created. He walked to the dining table and sat. The envelope from me lay in front of him. He traced the handwriting with his finger. Then he noticed something else, something he had never seen before. A small smear of dried blood on the corner of the table, from the night he shoved me into the counter. His stomach twisted violently. He stumbled back, gripping the chair for support. He whispered into the empty room, "I'm so sorry, Mom, but empty rooms don't answer back." Daniel dialed my number. It rang once, twice, three times. His hands trembled, but then a soft, automated voice: "This number is temporarily unreachable." He froze. He tried again. Same message. Again, same message. His heart dropped. He wasn't blocked. He wasn't ignored. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't allowed access to me, a consequence he never imagined. He sank to the floor, clutching his phone, whispering, "Mom, please, I need to talk to you." But growth demands patience, healing demands isolation, and consequences demand consistency. He had to learn that his actions created distance. Real distance, painful distance, necessary distance. I wasn't avoiding him, I wasn't punishing him. My phone was deliberately disconnected from him through the safety protocol the crisis team implemented. It wasn't permanent, just temporary, long enough for me to heal. Long enough for him to face himself. Long enough for him to understand that disrespect has a cost. And the cost was losing access to the woman who raised him. That evening, Alicia sat with a counselor from the crisis team. She was soft-spoken, trembling, but stronger than she had ever been. "I don't know if I want to go back," she admitted. "You don't have to decide now," the counselor said. "You only need to decide what's safe for today." "For today," Alicia whispered, "I want peace." "Then peace is what you'll have." She smiled weakly. Her healing had begun too. Back home, Daniel sat on the living room floor, knees pulled to his chest like a child. He stared at the unopened bottle on the shelf, the bottle of whiskey he used to reach for whenever he was overwhelmed. But today, he didn't reach for it. He didn't numb the pain. He let it sit inside him. He let it hurt. He let it break him open. Because the therapist's words echoed through him, "You cannot heal what you refuse to feel." He pressed a trembling hand to his chest. The emptiness, the guilt, the regret, it burned, but beneath it all, buried deep, something else stirred. The desire to change, not for his mother, not for Alicia. Not for appearances, for himself, because for the first time, he didn't want to be his father's son. At midnight, Daniel wrote a letter, the first honest letter of his adult life. Trembling hand, tear-stained paper, raw words that felt like ripping open old wounds. When he finished, he folded it carefully. He placed it in an envelope, and he wrote one name on it: Mom. He held it to his chest. "I will earn my way back to you," he whispered. "I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'll deserve a chance someday." Outside, the night was quiet, the world still, his heart breaking and rebuilding at the same time. And as he closed his eyes, holding the letter tight, He didn't know that the next morning would bring a revelation that would change everything again. The next morning began with a quiet fog rolling over the city, softening the world into muted shades of gray. Daniel stood at his window watching the mist drift past street lamps, clutching the envelope he wrote for me the night before. He hadn't slept. His eyes were red. His mind was swollen with thoughts that wouldn't settle, but he had made a decision. Today, he would try to reach me, not with excuses, not with justifications, not with the fake apologies he used to give Alicia after every outburst. This time, he wanted to give me honesty. A confession, accountability, and the first step of the long road toward repair. He showered, dressed carefully, brushed his hair, and left the house holding the envelope as if it were something fragile, a symbol of everything he wanted to change. He didn't know if I'd accept it. He didn't know if I'd open the door. He didn't know if I'd even look at him. But he knew he had to try. Trying was all he had left. Daniel drove across town, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding in his chest. He rehearsed what he might say if I answered the door. Mom, I'm sorry. No, too empty. Mom, I'm changing. Too soon, too hopeful. Mom, I was wrong. True, but still not enough. Mom, I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want a chance to earn it. Maybe that one, but when he reached my apartment building, there was an unfamiliar car parked outside. A silver sedan, government plates. Daniel's stomach tightened. He recognized the license format. He had seen it 2 days earlier, the crisis team. His breath hitched as he parked his car and stepped out. He scanned the parking lot. No sign of me, no officers, just quiet. But when he approached the entrance, he saw a white sheet of paper taped to the glass door. At first, he thought it was a maintenance notice. But as he got closer, the words sharpened into focus. This residence is currently protected under a temporary safety order. Unauthorized contact or visitation is prohibited. Daniel froze, his heart stopped. The envelope slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the ground like a wounded bird. He knelt slowly, picking it up with trembling hands. He stared at the notice. Read it again, and again. He understood every word. He was not allowed to see me. Not allowed to speak to me, not allowed to knock on my door, not allowed to approach. The world blurred at the edges. His chest tightened until breathing became a painful task. This wasn't just emotional distance anymore. This was a legal boundary. A wall he created with his own actions. A consequence he could not argue with. He stepped back from the door, shaking. A security guard stepped outside, raising a hand calmly. You Daniel Alvarez? Daniel nodded, throat tight. The guard spoke gently but firmly. You can't be here, son. But Daniel lifted the envelope helplessly. I need to give her something. Please, I won't stay. The guard shook his head. I'm sorry, her caseworker left clear instructions. No direct contact until the assessment period is over. How long? Daniel whispered. Minimum 90 days. 90. 3 months. 3 months without seeing the woman who raised him. 3 months without a chance to apologize. 3 months of being the son who was not allowed near his mother. Daniel pressed the envelope against his forehead, swallowing a sob. I ruined everything, he whispered. The guard softened his tone but stayed firm. If you leave the letter, I'll make sure her caseworker receives it. Daniel hesitated. Giving the letter to a stranger felt wrong, too impersonal, too distant, too cold for something that carried his heart. But what choice did he have? He nodded. With a trembling hand, he held out the envelope. The guard took it gently, as if understanding its weight. I'll see that it reaches the right people, he assured him. Daniel nodded again, barely able to speak. Then he turned away. And he walked back to his car, shoulders slumped, tears falling silently. No yelling, no anger, no denial, just heartbreak. I stood at the sink, rinsing a cup as sunlight spilled across the counter. The morning felt strangely peaceful. The kind of peace that comes after weeks, months, years of tension. I didn't know Daniel was outside my building. I didn't know he had written me a letter. I didn't know he had seen the safety notice. I only knew one thing: I needed distance. I needed healing. I needed air to breathe the way a woman does when she finally stops drowning. I dried the cup and placed it on the shelf. A knock at the door. My heart tightened, but not with fear. When I opened the door, a woman from the crisis team stood there holding a large envelope. This was left for you, she said softly. We screened it. It's safe to open if you choose to. I stared at it, a simple envelope, no name on the front. But I knew exactly who it was from. The world suddenly felt still. I reached out slowly, fingertips brushing the paper like it was a fragile memory. Thank you, I whispered. Take your time, she said, then left. I closed the door. The envelope sat in my hands like the weight of everything unsaid. I traced the seal with my thumb, but I didn't open it. Not yet. Healing doesn't rush toward closure. It takes one breath at a time. I placed the envelope on the table beside my tea. I would read it when my heart was ready, not when grief demanded it, not when guilt whispered. When I chose. Meanwhile, Alicia sat in the small crisis apartment kitchen, flipping through a notebook she hadn't opened in months, her journal. The one she used to write in secretly, late at night when Daniel fell asleep drunk or angry or withdrawn. Pages filled with fear. Pages filled with apologies that weren't hers to make. Pages filled with silent pleas. Why does he hurt me? Why can't I leave? Why do I still love him? But as she turned the pages, she found something unexpected, blank pages. And in those blank pages, she saw possibility. She didn't know if she loved Daniel anymore. She didn't know if she wanted to return to that house. She didn't know if she wanted to be his wife or his memory. But for the first time in years, she was free to choose. No shouting, no threats, no fear, just space. And then she discovered something else, something she had never noticed before. In the pocket of her jacket, a small, folded receipt from a pharmacy, dated 2 weeks ago. She opened it slowly. Her eyes widened. It wasn't a receipt for medicine. It was a receipt for a pregnancy test. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her heart hammered. She whispered to herself, "Oh God, what if?" Her entire world shifted underneath her feet. Daniel sat in his parked car outside my building long after he was asked to leave. He stared at the steering wheel, gripping it as if it could anchor him to the world. He knew this separation was necessary. He knew he had earned it, but knowing didn't stop the ache. "Mom," he whispered to no one, "please don't give up on me." A buzzing sound broke the silence, a message from an unknown number. He opened it with trembling fingers. "Daniel, this is the crisis team. We received your letter. Your mother will read it when she's ready. Meanwhile, continue therapy. Your progress will determine the next steps." Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. This wasn't hope. Not yet, but it was direction, a map. A place to begin again. As Daniel drove away, Alicia sat on her bed holding the receipt, hands shaking. And I stood in my apartment staring at the envelope he wrote. 3 lives intertwined, 3 hearts broken, 3 paths diverging, and none of us knew yet that the next 24 hours would bring a revelation that would change the entire story, a revelation involving Alicia and the question growing silently inside her, a question that would force Daniel and me to confront everything we'd been avoiding. Alicia sat frozen on the edge of the bed, the tiny pharmacy receipt trembling in her fingers. The silence around her felt thick, pressing, echoing with the possibilities contained in that single flimsy piece of paper. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. A pregnancy test. She bought it. She remembered buying it. She remembered holding her breath in the pharmacy aisle, terrified someone might see her, terrified of what the result might say. But after she bought it, everything blurred. Daniel's anger, his shouting, his unpredictable mood swings, the constant tension, her fear, my bruised wrist. The crisis team coming, being taken to the apartment. The intervention, she never took the test. She had shoved the bag into her jacket pocket and forgotten it in the chaos. Now the possibility slammed into her with the force of a tidal wave, her hands pressed against her stomach. What if, she whispered, her breath hitched, if she was pregnant, if she was carrying Daniel's child, then everything became infinitely more complicated. She squeezed her eyes shut as anxiety swirled inside her. A child deserved safety. A child deserved peace. A child deserved a father who wouldn't rage at the smallest things or lift a hand or slam a door in a way that made the walls tremble. Was Daniel capable of changing? Was he capable of becoming the man a child needed? She didn't know. She shouldn't have to know, but now she might have to. A tear slid down her cheek as she whispered, "God, please let me have strength." Daniel drove aimlessly around the city, unable to return home, unable to face silence alone. He pulled into a quiet parking lot, a park where he used to play as a child. He sat on a bench overlooking the empty swings. A memory surfaced him as a boy, no older than 7, pushing the swing, laughing, calling for me to watch. And me standing a few steps away, smiling, clapping, cheering proudly. He remembered that woman vividly. He remembered the warmth in my eyes, the softness of my voice, the way I never missed a moment. Then another memory surfaced, a much darker one. His father, tall and furious, dragging him off the swing for acting childish. His father's voice booming. His father's fingers gripping his arm too tightly. His father shoving him into the car. And me, running after them, panicked, terrified, begging, pleading. Daniel's throat closed. He buried his face in his hands. He'd always told himself he wasn't like his father. He wasn't that cruel, he wasn't that cold. But now he could see it, not in full, not in a perfect picture, but in flashes, the tone he used, the control he demanded. The anger that erupted from nowhere, the way Alicia shrank when he walked into a room, and the way I shrank in his presence the last year, as if I sensed something wrong long before he acknowledged it. Daniel stood abruptly, shaking. He couldn't sit there anymore. He needed direction. He needed help. He needed something to stop him from spiraling into the same abyss his father died in. He dialed the therapist's number. Dr. Lawson? He said, voice raw. I want to schedule another session. Today, if possible. I can't do this alone. The therapist didn't hesitate. I'll move a few things around. Meet me in an hour. Something inside Daniel softened, the first step toward humility. I made myself a cup of cinnamon tea and sat by the window, watching children play outside. Their laughter floated through the air like tiny shards of sunlight. I smiled faintly. But the envelope on my table pulled my eyes back again and again. It sat there, silent, heavy, waiting. My hand reached for it once, twice, withdrawn both times. I wasn't afraid of what he wrote. I was afraid of what opening it meant. Opening it meant acknowledging his effort. Opening it meant taking the first step toward reconciliation. Opening it meant letting myself hope. Hope is dangerous when you've been wounded by the person you love most. So I told myself, not today. Not because I was cold, not because I was punishing him, but because healing sometimes requires stillness, like a wound that must close before stitches can be touched. I made my tea hotter, sweeter, and breathed in the scent deeply. Today I would choose peace, not past pain. Not future fear, just peace. Alicia forced herself to stand, even though her legs trembled. She picked up her phone, hesitated, then dialed the crisis counselor. Can I ask you something private? She whispered. Of course. If I'm pregnant, Alicia began, voice cracking, do I have options that don't involve returning to Daniel? Yes, the counselor said firmly. You have every option, including staying safe while he works on himself. You are never required to return to danger. Alicia exhaled shakily. The counselor added gently, and if you are pregnant, you and the baby will be prioritized in every safety plan. Tears streamed down Alicia's cheeks. Okay, she whispered. Then I need to know. Do you have a test? No, but I think I bought one. You can take it here, I'll stay on the line. Alicia wiped her eyes and stood. She walked to the small bathroom in the apartment, flicking on the light. Her reflection in the mirror startled her, pale, anxious, fragile, but also braver than ever. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the bag. Inside was the unopened test. She closed the door and took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. With trembling hands, she prepared the test. Dr. Lawson's office smelled faintly of lavender. Daniel sank into the couch, overwhelmed, drained, desperate for guidance. The therapist regarded him calmly. You came back quickly, he said. Daniel nodded. I needed to. I need to keep talking. I need to understand what's wrong with me. What's wrong, Dr. Lawson corrected gently, is what's unhealed. Daniel swallowed. I remembered things, he said. About my dad, about things I haven't thought about in years. Dr. Lawson leaned forward slightly. What did you remember? Daniel stared at the rug. He punished me for everything, even for being a kid, even for laughing too loud. Even for existing. And how did that make you feel? Hated, Daniel whispered. Small, worthless. And when you felt powerless, how did you cope? Daniel's voice broke. I promised myself I'd never feel powerless again. The therapist nodded slowly. And that promise, he said, is the seed of your anger, Daniel. That promise is what grew into the version of you who lashes out, who controls, who fears losing dominance. Anger isn't your problem. Fear is. Daniel looked up sharply. Fear, he echoed. Yes, Dr. Lawson said. You're not angry at your mother or your wife. You're angry at the child you used to be, the child who was helpless, the child you swore to bury. Daniel's breath caught. But buried children, the therapist continued, always find a way to claw their way out. Daniel couldn't speak. He felt it. He knew it. Tell me, the therapist said softly, what is the one thing you fear the most right now? Daniel didn't hesitate, becoming my father. Silence settled, heavy and real. Then Dr. Lawson spoke the words that shifted everything further. You're not your father yet, but you are standing at the door he once walked through, and you cannot cross that threshold if you want a future with the people you love. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I'll do anything, he whispered. Anything. Good, the therapist replied. Then today we begin the real work. The timer beeped. Alicia stared down at the test on the bathroom counter. Her breath stopped. Her stomach twisted. The world around her blurred. The result was clear. Undeniable. Her knees turned weak. She whispered one word, "Oh God." She was pregnant. Alicia fell to the floor, tears streaming silently, not just from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that her life was changing instantly. Daniel sat in therapy, finally facing the darkness he'd ignored for years. And I sat alone in my apartment with an unopened envelope, not knowing that the next choice I made would affect not just Daniel and Alicia, but the innocent life growing quietly inside her. Everything was about to collide. Every secret, every wound, every choice. Alicia stayed on the bathroom floor for a long time. The pregnancy test lay beside her, its results staring back like a quiet truth she could no longer outrun. Her breathing came in small, unsteady bursts as she pressed both hands over her mouth, trying to keep herself from sobbing too loudly. She wasn't ready for this, not emotionally, not physically, not financially, not spiritually, and certainly not alone, but here she was. A woman who had finally escaped fear, sitting on cold tile, discovering she was carrying the child of the man she just left. The man who was unraveling. The man who was trying to change. The man who had hurt her. The man she once loved. The man whose mother was still healing from bruises he caused. She whispered to the empty room, "What do I do?" Her reflection in the mirror didn't answer. Alicia wiped her tears, stood shakily, and forced herself to breathe. She needed clarity. She needed guidance. She needed someone who understood pain, healing, and motherhood all at once. She needed me. Her thumb hovered over my contact. For a moment, fear almost stopped her. What if I rejected her? What if she was interrupting my healing? What if I blamed her even a little? What if this created more pain? But a softer thought whispered back. What if I did? What if I could help her? Alicia closed her eyes and she called. I was folding laundry, simple things, familiar things, trying to reclaim normalcy. The phone buzzed on the couch. When I saw Alicia's name, my heart clenched with both worry and tenderness. I answered immediately. "Alicia, are you all right?" Her breath trembled on the other end. I need to talk to you," she whispered. "Please?" My voice softened. "Of course, sweetheart, what's wrong?" There was silence for several seconds, then a choked whisper, "I'm pregnant." Everything inside me froze. The laundry slipped from my hands, my breath caught in my throat. Pregnant. Daniel's child. The child of the son who had become someone I barely recognized. The child of a home cracked by violence. The child of two people at a crossroads. I sank onto the couch slowly. "Oh, Alicia," I whispered. She broke into sobs. "I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can be a mother. I don't know if I can trust him. I don't know if I should keep it, or if I should run, or if I should wait, or if—" "SHH," I whispered gently. "Take a breath, one thing at a time." Her breathing grew shallow as she tried to calm down. I felt something inside me shift, a deep, old instinct rising, not as Daniel's mother, not as a survivor, but as a woman who had once stood alone while pregnant herself. "I'm here," I said firmly. "Whatever you decide, you won't be alone." Alicia wiped her face. "I'm scared. I know. What if he doesn't change? Then you still won't be alone," I said. "What if he does change?" she whispered, voice cracking. "What if he becomes the father he wants to be? Am I a monster for not believing in him yet?" "You're not a monster," I said. "You're a woman who has been surviving in fear. Fear doesn't disappear overnight." "But a baby," she whispered, her hand pressing against her stomach, "a baby deserves love, safety, stability." "Yes," I said gently. "And that begins with you, not Daniel, not me, you." Alicia's breath broke again. "I need to see you," she whispered. My heart softened even further. "Come over," I said. "We'll talk, we'll breathe, we'll figure it out." The crisis team officer escorted Alicia to my building, ensuring the safety order remained intact. When she arrived at my door, her face was pale and blotchy from crying. I pulled her into a hug immediately. She clung to me like a daughter. We sat at the table, 2 cups of herbal tea between us. The envelope Daniel had written sat nearby, untouched, watching quietly like a ghost of the past. Alicia glanced at it. "Is that?" I nodded. "Yes, his letter." "Are you going to read it?" "Not yet," I said softly. "I will, but when I'm ready." She nodded slowly. Then the words poured out of her in a flood. "I'm pregnant. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know who Daniel will become. I don't know if I want to raise a child who might inherit his anger." I reached forward and took her hands. "A child inherits love too." Her lips trembled. "But what if there isn't enough of it?" "There will be," I said firmly. "If you choose this path, you won't walk it alone." She broke into tears again, and I held her, like a mother. like a woman who had been broken once too, like someone who understood the complexity of love in its rawest form. Daniel stepped out of the therapist's office looking like someone who had fought a war he didn't know he was capable of surviving. His eyes were tired but clear. His hands shook from the effort of digging through memories he buried for decades. But something in him, some small, fragile part, felt lighter. He unlocked his car and sat inside, staring at the dashboard. His first instinct was to call Alicia, but he couldn't. The safety order applied to her, too. He couldn't reach either woman in his life. He swallowed hard. "I'll earn my way back," he murmured, one step at a time. He didn't know yet that Alicia was carrying a life that would tie him to her forever. He didn't know that she was with me. He didn't know that everything was about to change again. After comforting Alicia, I walked into the kitchen to refill our tea. My eyes drifted again to the envelope Daniel wrote. His handwriting, the slanted letters, the slight indentation from pressing too hard with the pen. I thought of him as a child, quiet, thoughtful, sensitive. A boy who cried when ants drowned in puddles. A boy who wrote me little notes saying, "I love you, Mom." Where did that child go? Was he still inside the man who hurt me? Was he still capable of love, of softness, of transformation? The bruises on my wrist were fading, but the memory wasn't. Alicia needed stability, a future, space to breathe, and she might be carrying my grandchild. That thought hit me like a warm, aching blow. A grandchild, a continuation, a chance to break the cycle rather than repeat it. I placed 2 cups of tea on the table. Alicia looked at me with fear and hope intertwined. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. I took a deep breath, and for the first time since the night he struck me, I said the words out loud. "Then I think it's time we talk to someone who can help." Alicia blinked. "Who?" I glanced at the envelope, then back at her. Then I said the words that would become the turning point of everything that came after. "Daniel's therapist." Alicia froze. "You want to talk to him?" "Yes," I said. "Not Daniel, the therapist. We need guidance. We need clarity. And if a child is coming, all of us need a plan." Alicia's eyes filled with tears of something new, relief, terror, hope, uncertainty all at once. I reached across the table. "I won't push you back into danger," I said gently. "But if Daniel is changing, truly changing, then we need to know it. We need to understand what's possible." Alicia whispered, "What if he can't change?" "Then we build a life without him," I said firmly. "You and me and the baby." Her breath caught. I squeezed her hand. "But what if he can change?" I added. Alicia looked down at her stomach, her hand trembling as she placed it there. "Then," she whispered, voice breaking, "maybe my child will have a chance at the father Daniel always wanted to be." Outside, the fog began to lift. Inside, 2 women sat holding each other's truths gently, wounded, brave, uncertain, hopeful. None of us knew that Daniel himself was about to hit the most painful revelation yet. None of us knew that the therapist had been expecting a call. None of us knew that by involving him, we were about to trigger the moment that would force Daniel to confront the darkest part of himself. I dialed Daniel's therapist, Dr. Lawson, with Alicia sitting beside me, trembling but determined. He answered almost immediately, his tone calm and steady. "Mrs. Alvarez, I've been expecting this call." He wasn't surprised. He wasn't confused. He already understood far more than we realized. I explained everything: Alicia's fear, her pregnancy, Daniel's breakdowns, the safety order, and the uncertainty gnawing at our family. When I finished, Dr. Lawson exhaled softly. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Daniel is working harder than any patient I've had in years. But there's a deeper wound he hasn't faced yet, something buried in his childhood." My hand tightened around the phone. "What is it?" I whispered. "A traumatic memory," the therapist replied. "One he's terrified to confront, and until he faces it, true change will remain incomplete." Alicia's hand found mine, her eyes widened with worry. "Can he heal?" she asked. "Yes," Dr. Lawson said firmly. "But he can't do it alone, and he can't do it with direct contact right now either. What he needs is a structured, safe path." I took a slow breath. "So what do we do?" The therapist answered with a clarity that settled the air around us. "We create a family healing plan, separate work, separate safety, unified progress." Within days, Dr. Lawson arranged something rare: a 3-person mediated healing program. Daniel would continue intensive therapy. Alicia would have her own counselor. I would receive support for trauma recovery. Eventually, when everyone was ready, a joint session would be considered, but not before. This wasn't a rushed reconciliation. This was a blueprint for real transformation. Alicia and I began our sessions first. We talked about fear, motherhood, identity, boundaries, and hope. Alicia grew stronger each day. I watched her shift from fragile to steady, from shaking to grounded. Her hand moved to her stomach now not with fear, but with gentle acceptance. She whispered to me one afternoon, "I want to keep the baby." I hugged her tightly. "You're going to be an incredible mother," I said. She whispered back, "Because you're teaching me how." Meanwhile, Daniel dove headfirst into therapy. He faced memories he had run from for decades. His father screaming, his mother crying, his childhood self hiding in closets, tiny fists pressed to his ears, his vow, as a child, that he would never be powerless again. He cried harder in those sessions than he ever had in his life. He apologized not to us yet, but to himself, to the child he had abandoned internally. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly the angry edge inside him softened. The need for control loosened. The fear transformed into understanding. He wrote letters he couldn't send. He practiced apologies he wouldn't rush. He learned empathy he had forgotten. He learned how to breathe through triggers. He learned how to see me and Alicia as humans, not extensions of his emotions. After 4 months, Dr. Lawson announced, "You're ready for your first joint session." I felt my heart twist. Alicia's hand trembled. Daniel, somewhere across the city, prepared too. We didn't meet at a home. We didn't meet privately. We met in a therapy room, neutral, safe, protected. Daniel walked in first. He looked different, not broken, not lost, not angry, just human. Just humbled, just a man learning how to rebuild. He didn't rush toward me. He didn't fall at my feet. He didn't cry immediately. He simply sat down, folded his hands, and whispered, "Mom," his voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." Tears filled my eyes. Not because the words were overdue, but because, for the first time, I believed him. Alicia entered next, holding her growing belly. Daniel froze, eyes wide, a mixture of love, fear, and awe flooding his face. You're pregnant?" he whispered. Alicia nodded. Daniel broke silently, deeply sincerely. "I'll do better," he whispered hoarsely. "Not for a second, not for a moment, for the rest of my life." I placed my hand over his. "You will," I said, "because you're choosing to." Healing wasn't immediate, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't linear, but it was real. Daniel completed his anger management program. He stayed in therapy. He apologized without excuses. He rebuilt trust brick by brick. Alicia grew stronger as her pregnancy progressed. She established boundaries. She chose her own pace. She built her independence, not dependent on Daniel, but parallel to him. I mended too. My bruises healed. My heart steadied. And I found peace not by forgetting, but by growing. We didn't return to how things used to be. We became something better. The day Alicia went into labor, she asked for me. Daniel was there too, not frantic, not reactive, but steady and gentle and present. When the baby was born, a tiny girl with Daniel's eyes and Alicia's soft features, the room filled with something warm and indescribable. Daniel held his daughter trembling. "I will never hurt you," he whispered to her. "I will break every cycle that broke me. I will be the father I never had, and the man your mother deserves." Alicia cried softly. I cried too. And for the first time, Daniel turned to me, eyes full of humility. "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me." I touched his cheek. "I didn't save you, Daniel," I said. "You saved yourself. I just stepped out of your way so you could see who you really are." He nodded, tears falling. We gathered in a small backyard garden, Alicia, Daniel, the baby, and me. Daniel grilled vegetables gently, careful not to burn anything. Alicia rocked the baby, humming. I watered the flowers, the sun warm on my shoulders. The air was peaceful, light, soft. Daniel turned to me and said, "Mom, every day I think about who I used to be, and every day I choose to be someone new." I smiled. That's all any of us can do. He hugged me gently, respectfully, lovingly. The baby laughed, a tiny squeal of pure joy. And in that moment, I realized the ending wasn't perfect. Life never is, but it was peaceful, it was safe, it was hopeful. And most of all, it was ours. A family rebuilt not by forgetting the pain, but by choosing to grow beyond it. If you enjoyed this story and want more powerful life lessons, emotional journeys, and real-world drama, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that touch hearts and open minds. Stay tuned, your next story is waiting.